Ideas for Impact, a new podcast where innovation meets sustainability head on. Let's take a fresh look at how we do business. Changemakers are innovating solutions to some of the toughest challenges we face in our world. In the process, they are creating their own mark on industry. Our guests are rebels with a cause. They are tearing down barriers, redefining success, and leaving a mark on their industries. Our guests are the disruptors who refuse to settle for business as usual. Join us to unravel the lessons learned behind their failures and their triumphs, and uncover the hidden opportunities for positive change. Co-hosted by me, Joanna Buczkowska-McCumber, and my friend, Deborah Host. Did you know that Canada holds a fifth of the world's fresh water? And yet, many communities still face boil water advisories, toxic algae blooms, and drying watersheds. The crisis isn't somewhere else, it's right here. And while policy is slow to catch up, a new wave of innovators is stepping in. Young people with lived experiences, big ideas, and the drive to turn prototypes and ideas into real impact. That's what AquaAction is all about. AquaAction is a Canadian national nonprofit backing the next generation of water innovators through their challenge programs, mentorships, and support for early stage ventures. They're helping young teams turn ideas into real-world solutions, restoring and protecting Canada's freshwater systems along the way. And in this episode, we're joined by AquaAction's head of program partnerships, a wonderful person that I know, Kariann. And we're going to have an incredible conversation where we talk about youth-led water innovation, the power of local action, and why the future of freshwater depends on big, bold ideas that actually scale. I cannot wait for you to hear this episode. Kariann, it's so good and fun to have you on the podcast today.
Great to be with you, Joanna.
So, Kariann, can you take us back to the beginning? What first drew you to AquaAction and its big mission?
AquaAction. My story with AquaAction starts 9 years ago now. And I was very grateful to find AquaAction when I did. My background is in business. I have an MBA, but I've always been interested in sustainability and in environmental and social outcomes of business. And AquaAction, with its focus on entrepreneurship and innovation and youth, but for freshwater outcomes, seemed to be this perfect space to bring all of my interests together. I mean, I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs, small business, so I get business, I get entrepreneurship. And I've worked teaching. I'm really interested in youth engagement. So that aspect is touched upon. And the fact that it's all about leveraging sort of youth talent and entrepreneurial spirit for freshwater outcomes is just like, it hits sort of all three key boxes for me.
Sometimes, it takes like all of those variables to like find a place that really meets those needs. And I know that like youth and focus on youth has been part of like throughout your career. You've definitely had impact on young people and their career paths. And so, of course, like AquaAction is very much rooted in youth-led innovation and entrepreneurship. And so why was it important for you to make young people the drivers of water solutions?
You know, I think that young people today are really tuned in to environmental concerns, climate change. Like it's part of a reality. You know, you and I, Joanna, in our generation, like we learned it as things were happening, but it's the reality now that young people are born into. And I think that informs how they think about the world, how they think about the work that they want to do, how they think, like the ideas that they come up with. And, we have to create a space for that sort of, I use the term like eco-ingenuity, right? If you really care deeply about the natural world, your entrepreneurship and your innovation and your ingenuity is informed by that and is going to be different. And so the solutions that will come out of that process will be different than what previous generations were able to think of and conceptualize. I mean, those are broad strokes, right? Obviously, I think there's been environmental awareness in generations before as well. But I think if I can say sort of as a larger mass of awareness and wanting to do things differently, I think there's the next generation, we've got to create that space, right? For those values and those concerns to come to the fore.
I love that. I love that thinking because it's so true. We sort of grew up as, all of these issues are imminent or upcoming, or that they're we were faced with more of the reality of the truth of the situation, if you will. But, these generations are certainly like growing up right in the thick of it as those impacts actually start making um, uh, like very serious impacts on not just the environment, but people's communities, economies, livelihoods, right?
Absolutely.
It's a different reality that they're certainly growing up with.
And I think, I think the impacts are closer to home. I think also, like I see it in my kids, like they're learning about this in school. Like this is, part of what they're growing up with, understanding about, the natural world and understanding about sustainability outcomes and climate change, freshwater conservation. For them, it's like, yes, of course we have to think about this, right? So I think it's like a precursor to what are the kinds of entrepreneurial activities that will come from that, I guess, new mindset, sort of a new sense of the reality that we're living in. And it's exciting, right? It's really exciting. And I think you have to see that we have to really create the space sort of for maybe mindsets that don't align with those values to sort of, okay, let's create space for some new ones.
Absolutely. It is such a mindset shift. It is so much about problem solving, right? But it's constant, if, the way that I see it, or the things that are being thrown at us in general, let alone young people, right? And so maybe talk to us about, for those of our listeners that perhaps are not aware, or maybe just aren't not quite as familiar with the many challenges and threats that exist for freshwater. So what are some of the biggest threats to freshwater in Canada right now? And after you answer that one, maybe talk about how, AquaAction is really trying to step in and maybe shift awareness and shift response to some of these big threats.
So our program is a tech innovation challenge, and we work in watersheds across the country to work with the folks who are like working on the water issues locally, to say, bring an issue to the program. And then we recruit the participants to work on solutions to respond to that problem statement, right? So it's very, I want to say it's very place-based, but this is really needs-based innovation, right? So the problem is real life. This is not theoretical. This is real. This is happening in community, or it's happening in a municipality, or it's happening, in business or in agriculture. So over the years, there's been several issues that come to the program that then, the students, I'll say students because we recruit post-secondary students and young grads, they're applying everything that they're learning to a real life problem. So for them, it's very meaningful. It's very engaging. They really see that, oh my God, this is like practical, pragmatic, tangible. Some of the issues that have come through the program are a lot of monitoring and detection issues. Invasive species is a big issue. How to detect invasive species, early detection or prevention of invasive species into watersheds. With rising climate and temperature changes, right? So ecosystem balances are changing, and so invasive species is a big issue. A lot of also runoff, impacts of runoff from agriculture, say, or stormwater runoff. Nitrogens and phosphorus impacts on waterways. So detection, collection, prevention type solutions are getting developed or are being sought by water problem holders. So there's a lot of water efficiencies as well. Gray water recycle, gray water use and capture in the built environment. So like really, every watershed you go to or every challenge we have, we're bringing really different issues in. So they can be defined by municipalities. They can be defined by NGOs who are working on conservation. How can we better monitor for toxicity levels, or how can we better detect for toxicity levels? Blue-green algae, for instance, is a big issue, and we see that, even here. You and I are both in Victoria, right? And there's a big issue now around some of our lakes with that. So, how do you detect? How do you prevent? How do you capture? How can you collect blue-green algae? And perhaps convert it into a biofuel, right? There's one of the young entrepreneurs who's working on that right now. So really, there's a lot of possibility. I could go on, but I want to give you an opportunity to, for us to have a conversation around it.
Absolutely. Like I know from my work with the Ocean Startup Project and some of the work in ocean and marine solutions, there's just so many different approaches to solving a problem too. Mm-hmm. And I know that's the case also in the freshwater space. And I think what's really interesting is that these sort of water in general, and sort of why we focus this season on water, is that it's a bit of like a, underrepresented focus in business, in support system, because there's such an abundance of it, and we don't consider like the many issues that exist because it's a little bit more removed, right? Until it becomes an issue in a community or for you in particular.
And it's interesting.
And I know,
I just want to respond to what you said there. Like, it's abundant, and I think, Canada is seen really as a very water endowed, very water rich country, and I think it's a bit of a myth, and it's something that has made us a little complacent when it comes to water, right? We think it is so plentiful and that it is endless. And we're learning now that that's not the case. And so I think it's that reality check, right? That is part of the mindset shift. Is like we cannot take water, I'll say, as a resource for granted, right? That it is never ending, because it is. Right? Aquifers are lowering, right? And water tables are decreasing. And, I've just heard here the Galiano Islands, the Gulf Islands are really suffering from lack of water. It's a huge issue, right? And communities are really looking at like, what do? We are going to run out of water. Like it's a critical issue. So I think we have to be careful when we say, that water is abundant, because it's not.
No. And I think that's really like the myth, right?
Yeah.
Is that because we're surrounded by it, we have abundance, but it's so sort of this lack of understanding of
exactly
of the realities.
Exactly.
So, I mean, you've talked about like so many different types of solutions and, ideas that youth innovators are coming up with and hopefully building, for you and your team, what makes a solution really stand out to you? And really, like, what do you look for in potential ideas or ventures that are coming through your challenge?
Well, as I said, we always start with the problem statement and a water issue leader that holds the problem statement and supports the teams as they work on them. So a solution is an exciting solution when it actually solves the problem that it sets out to solve, right? So there has to be that technical viability, that it's possible. And then that the team, or that I'll call them the young entrepreneurs, right? That they have the business plan, that there's potential to get the solution into a marketplace so it can be sustained, so that you can find, access the implementers, access the customer base, and then it's out there and it can slowly over time become part of the way, sort of a new way that business is run, or a new way that municipalities manage their water resources, or a new way a community is conserving its water, or working in a watershed, right? So there's the technical viability, then there's the business viability. And the other thing that's really important, and you know this too from your impact or your work in impact and entrepreneurship, is, it's hard work being an entrepreneur. So a big part of the success is the grit of the individual behind it. And it takes a lot of perseverance and a lot of commitment and a lot of hard work to survive as an entrepreneur, and especially I'd say to survive as a water tech entrepreneur, because it's a really tough marketplace. It's a hard sector.
Absolutely. Just entrepreneurship in general is really hard. Let alone if you really add that impact lens in there. There's so much complexity. And so with that in mind, you through the Aqua Hacking Challenge, you've seen so many teams come through. Maybe tell us, an example or two of company of ideas that have actually turned into real ventures that then have grown. We'd love to hear any that you might have.
I will tell you, there's several. We have over 80 now enterprises within the community of water tech enterprises in AquaAction. And a couple of the early ones I'll tell you about. Can Forecast, Montreal-based, but working across Canada, was working with an issue with the city of Montreal. And there was a lot of infrastructure, water infrastructure weaknesses. And they developed, based on an AI using artificial intelligence and sensors, sort of a predictive model to work with the municipalities, say, hey, this is where the water mains are looking to be weaker, or predicting where there could be weaknesses, so that they could deploy maintenance ahead of a break or ahead of a breach. And that's been unbelievable, right? Very helpful for municipalities, and they're working with municipalities across the country to deploy their technology. So predictive model using artificial intelligence. Another young team of women. So we're working with World Wildlife Canada, who brought the issue of excessive road salt use. Maybe less of an issue here in Victoria, but a big issue in many parts of the country, where the road salt trucks are deploying large amounts, sometimes too much for what's needed in any instance. And the impact on the inland waterways is that, some of them are saltier than ocean water. So they have been working they developed a small unit to install on the road salt trucks that use all the meteorological data, use all the sort of the road condition data to say what's the right amount of salt to deploy. And they're testing that in municipalities in Quebec to see, okay, how can we be more efficient on the amount of road salt that is used, which is a huge cost savings to municipalities, which decreases the excess runoff, and also huge savings in terms of the erosion impact of excessive salt. So those are a couple that come to mind. There's also another one I was mentioning before, the blue-green algae. And all of these, interestingly, Joanna, that are coming to mind are all started by women. This third one also started by a young woman, and it's blue-green algae collection, conversion into a biofuel. And she's in the early stages of testing her technology, but incredible opportunity and growing in terms of lots of interest to sort of pilot this technology to see, okay, is this usable in specific areas where blue-green algae is a problem? Just amazing different opportunities, and it could go on. But I'll mention those three because they are led by young women. And I think that's really an interesting phenomena. I'm going on a little bit of a segue here, but one thing we've noticed is close to half of the founders of the enterprises in AquaAction are women-led. And that's really interesting to see in the clean tech space.
So through the Aqua Hacking Challenge, you've worked with so many different teams. And I know there's such a vast variety of types of ventures that have come out of this. I'd love to hear some examples of, companies that have emerged or social enterprises that have emerged just from like these ideas that young innovators have come up with and into real ventures that have grown and made real impact.
Absolutely. Wow, there's so many stories to pull upon. We have over 80 enterprises at various stages of development within, I'll say, the family of water tech enterprises in AquaAction. A couple that stand out for me, sort of to get an idea of different types of solutions. Bellina is one of the young enterprises, and they have created, microplastics, right, is a big issue, and one of the sources of microplastics is from our clothes when we wash them, and so they've created a microfiber trapping filter for washing machines to reduce microplastic pollution from entering the water system. Right. So you can imagine how promising that will be. And you can imagine into the future where that'll just be like standard, the way washing machines or dryers are made in the future to capture microplastics and prevent them from entering the water system. So that's one example. Another one, Biocene. I mentioned blue-green algae before. They have developed a technology that removes blue-green algae, collects it from lakes, and turns it into a biomass, a biofuel. And that could be an incredible sort of a derivative product. So not only, removing blue-green algae, but actually converting it into something of value. So they're a startup, a young startup, but incredible potential, and many communities looking at testing the technologies with them to see how impactful it is in different setups. Then there's a young entrepreneur who's developed a solution to produce beer with less water or more efficient use of water, right? So, I mean, water is a big input item for many processes. So, how can we have a sort of water responsible brewing process? So BrewSonic, a young entrepreneur who's doing really well and is testing it with a couple of microbreweries to ensure that the beer quality is the same and the taste is the same, but just that the water use is reduced. Who else can I think of? There's a great young team. I say young team. These are amazing. They're all young entrepreneurs, right? 3 women. Clean Nature is the name of their enterprise. And they have developed a platform using artificial intelligence to help municipalities deploy road salt trucks much more efficiently, but for the trucks to only disperse the salt, the right amount of salt, not over use of road salt, because that has incredibly devastating impacts on inland waterways. In Eastern Canada or in Quebec and Ontario, some of the inland waterways are saltier than the ocean due to massive offlow of road salts into the streams. So huge impact environmentally and also cost savings for municipalities. There's a lot of the enterprises, too, that are working in the built environment with gray water capture, gray water reuse, a lot of those sort of energy and water efficiency technologies to ensure that, the buildings of the future, the homes of the future are more water aware and water responsible and have a lesser water footprint. I mean, I could go on and on. So there you go. You get a bit of a taste of the kinds of solutions, right, that are being developed.
There's such a vast variety, and just like it's such a great example of all the various ways we can tackle all of these challenges that exist in community and city and in our country. And so, also reminded of like the ingenuity of young people, right? To be like, okay, we put them in the room and create that space that you talked about. Lots of amazing things can happen.
Yeah. I think what I think is really interesting is When you bring an innovation lens to a problem and you focus on, like, if the problem, the issue is water, like water is in everything we do. It's like almost, every industrial process, every aspect of life, there's water. So if you work on the premise, we want to use less water, we want to have less impact on water, and those, it could be that things were designed without those criteria set from the start, right? So it means you're gonna think completely differently about, okay, how do I do it differently? How do I design differently if I hold water as the center point of less impact, less harm, more health? And I think that's really interesting. So it's sort of like it's a real shift in the design imperative when you put water at the center. And so, it opens up all kinds of possibilities in terms of, like, types of jobs, types of careers, types of solutions, types of innovations when you do that, when you hold water as your sort of your I say your raison d'être, but the reason why you're doing your work, right? Less harm, more health, less impact. So it's really interesting, actually, to think about it that way.
So, I mean, we know that water tech quite often doesn't fit like the typical startup model or what we've traditionally seen because it's hardware heavy. There's typically lots of regulation that companies have to jump through, and often it's public sector dependent. And so, how does AquaAction help these ventures that are emerging navigate these sometimes, if not sometimes, a lot of the times, very complex landscapes?
I would say, a couple of ways. Like, some of the examples that I listed, right, are more, let's say, either, could be B2C, could be B2B kind of models, right? So not necessarily in the municipal domain. Some are, and many need to be, just by the nature of, how our communities and society is built in terms of water management. And so 3 years ago, as we were staying in touch with a lot of the entrepreneurs that were coming out of the challenge program, and we wanted to, like, support them and see them succeed, many of them came back to us and said, I'm trying to get into these municipalities and it's really tough, and can you help us? And we had set them up with support from incubators, but incubators were struggling because, as you say, right, working in the water sector is different. This is not just cut and paste entrepreneurship. So we established a secondary program called Aqua Entrepreneur, and it was focused specifically on supporting enterprises to gain access to municipalities to test their technology. So for pilots, and eventually for a first contract, and sort of creating a bit of a safe testing space, working with municipalities, helping to support them be open to testing innovations in new spaces. Like I mentioned the road salt one, right? Like, we worked to sort of connect these young entrepreneurs with a municipality that had identified, okay, road salt is an issue. We're sort of open to seeing, can we do it differently? So, how do you build that partnership so that there's trust and there's an opportunity to test, and off they go now. So it is tough. It does require additional support. It does require additional funding. It takes time and effort and funds for pilots. So there's a lot of support too that's required to get the sort of financial infrastructure in place to enable these pilots to take place. And so we really work to help facilitate that. The program that I mentioned, Aqua Entrepreneur, is funded by the province of Quebec. So it was a pilot in Quebec to support Quebec-based entrepreneurs and get them into pilot situations. So, the province is really seeing, okay, we need to support this kind of innovation. And now we're looking to bring that program to other jurisdictions as well, because that same need exists everywhere, obviously.
And so, as a leader, in this space, working with an innovation, working with an impact, how do you really, balance hope and urgency in the face of, the realities of all of the environmental threats that exist around us, and all that noise and all that pressure. What keeps you going?
Working with young people is incredibly energizing and inspiring. And I think part of part of our mission is to create that sort of sense of hope, right? Like we can do it better, we can do it differently, and I think that just infuses, like I would say, like all my colleagues within AquaAction are infused with that sense of yes, it's possible, and then the participants that come to the program also have that incredible sense of yes, we can do it. So the work, just by the nature of what the work is, helps to sort of balance the sense of sometimes despair that's out there. It's like, oh my God, these are just massive issues. It's like, okay, how do we break it down? Let's design, let's fix the pieces we can, right? Like just to start to work on something. I'd say that's personally that helps me too, right? Because then it's like, okay, it is possible, right? So I derive a lot of inspiration and a lot of sense of hope from the work that I do with AquaAction, from the young entrepreneurs and innovators that come with all of their enthusiasm, their deep passion and commitment to this. It's like it gives you energy. And I think it's really remarkable. It's really, really remarkable. You see too the sense of community that's created around water. And I'm biased, but I'd like to say that water. It's a really special topic or an issue to work on. Like water is, you hear often about being near water is very calming. I myself, I'm a big water baby, right? Like swimming. I now cold ocean dip because I live in Victoria. And there's something very healing about water. And water flows and people gather around water. And there's something about that I think is transmitted in working in water tech solutions. In our program, the participants, when they get to a certain stage of the challenge, the phase 2, right, when the finalist teams are selected and they still have sort of 3 or 4 months to go in the program, we bring them on what we call an expedition. So a long weekend where we go, I'd say a little bit of a retreat, but where we're on the land and we're on the water, and it's about connecting to why are we working on these solutions? Why are these problems really important? And it's incredible the transformation that takes place when they come out of the competition. They're in sort of together as a group of problem solvers. They're no longer competing with each other, but they actually want to help each other all succeed. And it's this experiential learning piece where they feel connected to water. They understand the deeper why of what they're doing. And it's like, yes. And they come away from that connected, grounded, but even more committed, I'd say, to like, we've got to solve this problem. And that brings a lot of hope, right? And I really do think that, working on water is, there's a power to that. It gives an energy that's just really transformative, which is what we need in the world, I think.
Yeah. So on that note, when you look at the Canadian landscape, and you talked about some of the supports that exist in Quebec, where do you feel like we need to double down in the Canadian innovation system to really support these types of solutions and these spaces for these solutions to emerge?
Well, I guess you can say it's a little bit exciting at the moment. There's a lot of focus on freshwater in Canada at the moment, in our current geopolitical context. And I would say because of some external threats that we've heard on our freshwater, so there's a real concerted focus now on, okay, freshwater in Canada. And we've heard the government say, "Hey, we need to invest in a water tech fund." which is amazing. I mean, let's see now if it comes through. But we heard it certainly on the campaign trail not too long ago. So I think there's a focus, there's an understanding that the innovation and the entrepreneurial drive. I mean, Canada is such a center for innovation and so many entrepreneurs and such entrepreneurial spirit. We can take that now and focus it on water. That can only be a positive thing, right? So to complement the conservation and the restoration and all of that important work, we also need to bring, the business sector and entrepreneurship and innovation to the table. And I think there's a real appetite for that now. There's a real understanding that now is the time for that. And I do believe that it's like that has to come from government down. Like, this is a priority, a national priority, that we invest in solutions for water. And I'm really hopeful that we're going to see that with the current government. Now we're in summer, it's recess, and in the fall will come the budget. So I really look forward to seeing, are they going to put the money where they said they would?
To say it nicely.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. But I am hopeful. And I think, I really am hopeful. I think this is the time, maybe this is the government that can do that. So, we have our fingers crossed for that, and we're certainly pushing for it.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of great things happening, and there's a lot of, great organizations and people, and then of course all the entrepreneurs and innovators, and you can see the momentum, right? Like, it's not just one person or one organization working towards it. There's a momentum, and the various government forces and funding bodies are really looking at this as water as a key area of focus for innovation, which is exciting. I agree with you. It's an exciting time, and it's I love it because it's ambiguous what's going to happen, and the future is being written as we speak.
I know. Well, yeah, it's but I think it's interesting too, because you can really take sort of an economic development lens to this as well, right? Like, working on water is much more than just a Ministry of Environment and Climate Change issue, right? Like, water, I sort of believe it's like all ministries need to focus on water, right? Whether it's innovation, whether it's small business, whether it's education, whether it's health, whether, there's water could be everywhere. And so I think that's maybe that's a little bit of the shift that we're starting to see, right? Like, it's not just an environmental issue. It's so much more. And that's exciting. We think a lot too about leadership development and capacity building. How are we preparing, we talk about youth, right? And future leaders and next gen leaders, is to be water aware and to lead from that place, and with that awareness, right? So it's a whole different, again, we get to the mindset and skill set. So, if we're coming in not with a sense of, oh, water is abundant, it's no, water is precious. It is scarce. This is something we have to manage very differently. You're going to get a whole different kind, we get back to the different kind of leadership, different kind of decisions, different kind of innovation based on that. And I think that's what we're starting to see as well.
So if you had the audience of every young person in Canada and they could hear you, what would you tell them?
I would, there's a lot of things to tell them, but
just
about
a small
water,
question. Yeah. Just a small question.
I would say, know where your water comes from, right? Like, when you turn your tap on, know why you have drinkable water coming from your tap. Like here in Victoria, we're so lucky, right? Like, it comes from the watershed. There's incredible protected land that is the source water for our drinking water here in Victoria. I visited it, I toured it. It's unbelievable. And it's protected for, like, they're planning, generations into the future about how much land do we need to protect to hold the water that will be the drinking water for Victoria, Greater Victoria, and surrounding areas as it grows. It's unique here, and I guess Vancouver has something similar. But know where your water comes from, and know the watershed you live in. Like, what are the rivers and the streams around where you live, and how do you interface and connect with them, and how do your daily actions and activities impact the water? And I think that's really important, right? Because water is very place-based. And even start to think about the products that you're using, right? Like, oh, okay, so how much water did it take, for this, for my coffee beans, for my, for the fruit, just that sense of awareness, I think, is really important. And then it will inspire different actions and different choices. And if you have, as a young person, if you have an idea about doing things differently, don't negative self-talk to not take action. Take action, do something, find out, be curious, ask questions, and see how you can make a difference. Because I tell you, if we don't, then we're in trouble, and then you lose hope. But one has to really nurture those curiosities and those cares and concerns when it comes to fresh water. That would be what I would say. It's what I tell my kids all the time. You have a question? You're curious? Let's find out. Go ask the questions. Where do you need to get the information? Who do you need to ask? Why are things happening this way? Dig into it, because sometimes things happen, it could be done different. You have to just ask the question, and that brings about change.
Such a great note to end on. It is so much about curiosity and asking the questions and not just letting things be as they are, right?
Exactly.
Sort of questioning that. I think that's where so much innovation and new ideas and new solutions evolve from. So I love that note. Kariann, thank you for joining us. This has been super, super fun and so insightful.
Great. Thanks so much, Joanna.
As we wrap up today's episode, we hope you're leaving with insights that ignite a spark within you. At the core of every story we cover lies the undeniable truth. What truly drives impact is the relentless pursuit of change, paired with a deep commitment to the greater good. We're always reminded that making a mark on the world is not an easy task and isn't just about breaking through barriers. It's about thinking differently about what sustainability means in our ever-changing world and what is possible in creating it. Thank you so much for joining us on Ideas for Impact, where rebels with a cause redefine the meaning of what is possible. For more episodes that challenge the norm, follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. And of course, always dive deeper into our journey with us at ideasforimpactagency.com. Until next time, friends, keep pushing the boundaries of what is possible.